Hello, Holy Wiremod here. Welcome to the second video in the GLua Pro tutorial series. And this time we're going to be covering the folder structure. Now, the folder structure is very important. I don't know why other series do not include this because you need to know this, and it's kind of mind-boggling if you're just getting into this and no one explains it to you. So pretty much I'm going to be covering, the Gary's Mod folder. Let's go in here for our server. And let's start with what we're familiar with. We know game modes a little bit. So with game modes, remember that we based our prior game mode off the base game mode. So let's go into here. And you notice we have a couple things in here. We have the backgrounds, which of course we're going to have the backgrounds for here if we select the game mode via this option right here. And then we have entities. Now the entities folder is very important. You have things such as effects, those can be entities. So let's take a look into this. And you remember with share.lua in the last video how we had a GM table, then there was that dot, and then there was a key value next to that dot. So just like that with effects and entities in general, the type of entity is going to have its own table. There's going to be a dot to reference a key value. So remember this dot is like a reference on the table. And that certain key value on this table is going to be assigned a certain data type. So we'll go over data types in the next video so you're not confused. So we also have functions, of course, and whatnot. And these are good files to read. I do not recommend you edit any of these files unless you mess something up in the future and you have to re-download your server, which is a pain in the rear. So I just recommend you use this for educational purposes only. So the second type of entities is the entities folder. Now with these entities, you're going to have basic entities. You can have spawn points, for example. Now notice the table here is called int to refer to entities. And then we have a dot to reference the type key value here. And this is going to be assigned a string value. So that's one type of entity. You also have the basic base entity. So if you're going to be spawning things like crates or objects into the map that are props, for example, you're going to be relying on this base entity. So notice there is a init for server, cl_init for client, and shared for both server and client, just like we went over in the last video. And we have again the int table with reference to the base, so base entity. Enum is going to be the type. We'll go over this when we actually make our own entity, so it shouldn't confuse you. Like I said, this is just an overview. And look, we have familiar commands. We have add CSLua file, we have include, and a bunch of other functions which would go with the entity type. So you also have what's known as the glorified entity, and that is an NPC, which means that all the commands that you can use for the entity, you can pretty much use for the NPC as well. Now, an NPC is a little bit more tricky to use, and we'll be going into that later because it uses something called schedules, or schedules if you're American. And these schedules will be giving the entity certain commands or tasks in which it'll be doing. So that's how you actually make your entity do stuff, but we'll be getting into these things a little bit later as it involves sequences and whatnot. And that can be a little tricky at first until you have someone to properly explain it to you, like you will be learning in this tutorial series. Now, we also have Nextbot, which is more of an advanced version of an entity or NPC. And this Nextbot has behaviors instead of the other entities method of schedules. And the behaviors are run through a loop, and they have coroutines and whatnot. We can get into that again a little bit later in the tutorial series when we cover entities. All right, so next in the entities folder for the base game mode, we have weapons. Now this will be where your sweeps go. And you have init right here, and cl init and shared, of course, and our favorite add CSLua file and include that we know. But this time sweeps use the sweep table, and they reference the key values of, you have wait, you have auto switch to, auto switch from, which stores a Boolean value, while wait stores integer. And then we also have different things for the client as well, like what slot your SWEP is going to be in and whatnot. We're going to be going over SWEPs a little bit later as well when we get into the entities part of the tutorial series. So there you go, you have weapons and SWEPs, and of course we have the game modes folder. And to no surprise, we have the init for server, CL init for client, and shared for both server and client using our favorite commands. Except with base, you don't really see much add CS Lua file in this one, but that's okay. Okay, so now you have a basic understanding. Of course, we have other things here. I want you to take notice that we have CL underscore, then it says death notice. Well, you can also put SV underscore in your file name to reference a server file, just to keep it more organized, or you can put SH underscore in front of it to reference a shared file. So this is easy for you. And in the next tutorial, when we further go into init.lua, I'm going to be showing you a nice little trick, and it'll help you into adding all these files automatically, so you don't have to go through all the effort of including everything like you see in here. So, all right, so the next thing we want to go into is the basic file structure for add-ons. So add-ons, okay, so you look at this structure of the files. You have Lua, you have maps, you have materials, there's a models folder, which can also be placed here as well. And all these things are included too by adding on into the add-ons folder. So you can actually add additional folders into these folders by simply putting something in the add-ons folder, such as a warrant, for example. And notice there is a Lua folder, just like there is a Lua folder right here. So if we go forward into Lua folder, we have the Autorun folder. The Autorun folder automatically runs any Lua files inside of this folder. Generally, you'll have shared files. Remember, we have sh underscore to reference the shared. We'll have server files in the server folder, which has sv underscore, then the name, and then client files, which we know because we see the cl underscore. And then you have the other folders which you can have in here, which maybe includes. So I'll just make a sample includes folder so you can just see that. And then we have things you can put in here. You can have enumerations folder, extensions folder, modules folder. So just imagine we have some folders there, that's fine. And I won't be getting into that into too much detail until we cover add-ons, so don't worry about that. This is just so you can basically understand add-ons. Then we also have maps. So notice if we go back to Gary's mod, as we said, we have the maps right here. So we have maps, and that'll have our map file right there. And then we also have materials, models. So go through all this file path until you find all the model files. And lastly, the materials, which will have all the information for the materials that the model uses. And of course, as you guessed it, these go into the models and materials file. By default, there's no models file, but that's all right. You can always create one if you wish to do so. All right, so that's going to cover the basic file structure for everything that you need to actually proceed in this video. If you have any questions, there's good references online. There's this wiki that you can use as well, which will cover the folder structure and the file structure and all that, and it'll help you really understand that. If you have any questions, of course, leave so in the comments below. And as always, if you like the material, feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and that little bell thing as well, whatever that's for. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out Hexane Networks for affordable and high-performance server hosting. That's Hexane Networks, whose link is in the description below.